So chapter 4 on socialization, I think the key is the relation between individual and society. So as individuals, how do society get inside us? Right, that's essentially, how do we become a member of society when we are born? Right, essentially, how does society as a concept get into us? And we say through socialization. And where we internalize the ideals and rules. Ideals here refers to values, rules refers to specific norms of the society we're born into. And then how do we develop a social identity or social self? Here, I'm not talking about personality, I'm talking about, social self. And through social interactions, the core of a sociological idea that, in a sense, how do you find out who you are? It's not simply to dig into your personality type. Rather, how do you think who you are come from our interaction? Coming from our interaction with other people, right? And so, so through looking glass self, we call this idea for looking glass self, the core is we develop the emotional origin of ourself, right? In a sense, how do I feel shame, confidence, all those kind of feelings? Where does feeling come from? The feeling, where does feeling of myself, of my own self-image, come from? Social feelings of myself that come from looking glass self. By imagining how other people think of me, I develop, if they think good of me, I feel confident. If they don't feel good of me, if I perceive them don't see me good, my self-esteem decline, right? Simple. And then George Herbert Mead teaches us we develop social self through role taking, basically looking at yourself from other people's perspectives as the perspective you take on, expanding from individual significant other to multiple significant other to the societal generalized other, right? Social conscious. So that is more talking about our cognitive or moral self. It's not simply myself in terms of how I feel about myself. Now it's more of my moral self in terms of, when I calculate my self-interest, who's in the sphere of when I calculate self-interest. When I calculate self-interest, no longer myself, but I began to think of my own survival, my own self-interest include the person I love, my family I love, and the community I love, and the country I love, right? So basically, when you calculate, usually people call it enlightened self-interest, where you calculate self-interest is much more wide, right? And that's honestly one of the reasons why I'm just thinking on the spot here, when we do elections, sometimes, I don't know about you guys, many of us, I would imagine, sometimes struggle, right? Because, sometimes what you think is good for yourself may not good for your friends, may not good for your country or the people you care. So how do I decide, right? That's why sometimes we struggle between, this part of the policy I like, but other parts I don't like. I think few of us really buy into 100% one party's platform, so far. So that's why we struggle, right? So, but anyway, rotate. Right? The issue is the more complex the roles you take, the more it's complex the way you develop yourself. And how is social order continuity possible? So since socialization is about internalize the values and norms, how do these values and norms internalize into us? The process, the mechanism. Two of the major mechanisms are through roles and statuses, social positions. And what you're supposed to do are written into your job descriptions pretty much, right? So the roles and norms are written into the social positions and the social expectations. And so basically they are like a blueprint. Society uses roles and statuses to organize our daily lives. Okay, so that's, pretty much that's what it means. And how do socialization not only connects us, like functionalism claim, but also it pass inequality through generations. So how does inequality pass through generations? We argue by differential parenting styles that we talked about last time. Basically, how parenting style differences may influence. By the way, everybody know, okay, there's complexities here, okay? Everybody know that not everybody who's working class or middle class act the same way. We all know that, so it's not surprising, okay? And America compared to US, most Americans value self-expression more than conformity. That we all know as well. We're just simply looking at within the US context, what are the larger pattern of differences? Okay. It doesn't ignore there's of course individual differences. Okay. So there's a lot of overlap between the two. Those examples do not deny the larger pattern, although they do make you think, right, in a sense. Do make you think that how parenting style really not deterministic if there's so much overlap. Right? But still, that's larger pattern that teach us different parenting styles, because different parenting styles teach us different cultural capital, the soft skills, right, the dispositions, the temperaments we have. Yeah. And also teach us gender roles. Gender role, I didn't give it to you, but I think there's a quiz question there. So I'm just going to talk about it very quickly. Okay. This is a study, old study, but I find it quite interesting, so I'll just share with you. Okay. By the way, the quiz do have 1 or 2 questions. I didn't get time to revise, and it's already released. So there are 1 or 2 questions I may have to just give points to people. One of the questions I think having to do with Turing test in your textbook. I know anybody in the room knows what Turing test is? Where they use computers, they use people to interact with real people and computer with a screen in the front, and to see whether you can tell whose computer, who's the human being you're interacting with, right? And up to now, mostly computers fail. Okay, especially when you're being sarcastic. For example, computer couldn't pick up, but now AI is changing a lot of this. So the reason why I think that question I may have to retire in the future, this is the part of teaching social science. AI is developing so fast that previously, I think what human can do, machine cannot do, may no longer apply. So far, so that's why I have to retire the question. I make it just give you a point if you got it wrong. Okay, that question. And there's 1 more question, I think. I don't remember where it is. Okay, but I'll take a look. Okay. Now, this is for gender issue. Okay, just very quickly. Well, your textbook also talk about other gender issues. I'm going to remove them to chapter 8 to discuss, okay, which is about gender. So here I just want to talk a little bit of gender socialization at childhood. Okay, this is very, very interesting social psychological study. So this is 1980s, I believe, 2 professors, Deloache and Cassidy. Okay, if you're interested, you can Google them. I think the article is online and for free. Okay, what they did is they asked parents to come over to study how parents teach their children. And of course, all psychologists are liars. They manipulate a little bit. Okay, so what they do is, yes, they do want to study how parents teach their children, but the parents don't know is when they bring the children inside the lab. Okay, so they're waiting until the experimenter asks them in, right? And when they're waiting, the experiment already began. What they didn't know. Okay, they're just waiting there. So as imagine your parents bring young children who cannot read yet. So parents usually to pick up magazines or children's books around, and you read a book to them, right? You describe the book to them, right? And they are picture books. It doesn't have words. So you have to look at the picture and describe the story to the child, right? And what's interesting is they intentionally chose the children's picture books, where in the picture, the animals are not clearly male or female. Okay, this is 1980s. The trans issue hasn't come up yet. Okay, so that 1980s, the textbooks, the children's books, some of them want to teach their children gender neutral roles. Because of that, they want to create gender neutral toys. The Toys R Us tend to do that. Okay, so they'll say I use green, I use orange. I don't know which color, which gender it is anymore. Not pink or blue, right? So here I just put a few pictures here. Some of them may not be so clear, but that's actually the books they used. Okay, there were some other books. Okay, I think the 10 Teddy Bears. Never seen that. Okay, What's the farm something? Okay, and here the frog, where are you? A lot of these basically you want to. So basically, you're a parent. You're trying to describe this story to your children, but you don't know what the gender it is. So they want to see when the parents are in doubt, which pronoun do they use? He, she, or it. You go so far? Okay. And that's, I mean, this is nothing to do with political pronouns. This is, okay. It's just simply looking at when parents are in doubt, how do they assign gender? Okay. And they found out the general pattern at the time, at least, is when parents are really in doubt, just automatically calling the little animal as he. By default, just fall into it. Okay. But what they're teaching, I mean, that's a very simple story, right? It's on the surface, a very simple story. Just when parents are in doubt, they like to use the term he. Okay. And remember, these are things where the animal are not like having a little weird white, blue or pink, and they're not driving a truck or whatever, they're not doing gendered activities, right? So the parents really don't know how to say this. Okay. Their larger lessons are two. Okay, I think it's quite interesting, insightful. Okay, one is they argue the toy industry and every place try to give children gender neutral pictures and toys, but they argue they may not work because really the early childhood, the gatekeeper are the parents. So if you can produce many gender neutral things in there, but the parents may still shift them into gender stereotypes. You follow me so far? So I think that's a bigger lesson they show. Okay, they push it further, which may be controversial. Okay, they argue actually if you really want to produce gender neutral children, okay, so basically they can they don't care about their gender, they just do whatever they want to do to be successful. Okay, if you really want to release that potential, not constrained by gender roles, they argue actually you should go further. Instead of producing gender neutral toys, you produce a female driving a truck, a male, for example, taking care of baby. Just so far, once you do that, you may be able to change. But simply doing gender neutral, you may not be able to change it. Everybody found me so far? Okay, that's insight from there. If I make it now here, I don't think more people get offended. But if I push it further, that'll be just teaching color blindness would not work. So basically, you need to push further to flip it. Then it may force behavior change, right? That's pretty much. But that's what I find interesting. Okay, so gender socialization, parents play a key role. I'm going to shift here to dramaturgical school. Okay. I write here how do we play out social. So society has social structures, roles, and statuses, right? And Julie and me teach us how we are pretty much the feedback from others, both emotionally and morally. Feedback from others, how we define who we are. Okay. The person who's in sharp contrast, but also in sociology, the name is Erving Goffman. This is not difficult to understand. Okay. Erving Goffman, very famous presentation of self. Anybody heard about this before? Probably you've heard about him. Erving Goffman, extremely famous, okay, after 1960s. Basically, his self is no longer a passive self. His self is an active self, okay? Rather than you just, you are who you are as an imprint of other people's feedback. Here, rather than society get into you, here is you actually as a player. You manipulate how other people see. It's a totally different way. Okay, but this is not psychology because it is not looking at how you shape society. Rather, it's looking at how how you use social interaction. The unit not social interaction, not individual, right? How you use social interaction to manipulate other people's feeling of you. Okay, you all know this. Your social media will do this day in, day out. Okay, before we post, seldom do we post in just basically how we feel. We usually think a little bit. Okay, that's the very fact you think a little bit what to write in, right? How to write it, right? Who to write it to. It's pretty much dramaturgical school. The world is a stage. We're all players. it's not a passive self. It's a totally active self. Okay. To the extent, honestly, I began to ask myself, if you really follow dramaturgical school, people say we find my true self. In their perspective, almost everybody's fake. Basically, there's no such thing as true self. Okay. Basically, every moment, because we occupy roles, teacher, father, doctor, whatever. So basically, what I'm doing is I'm constantly playing roles, essentially. Okay. And basically, if you say your authentic self, they don't even know what your authentic self is. Okay. And that's essentially Erving Goffman. So the world is a stage. We're all players in them. Okay. Let me make it bigger. The Goffman pretty much is about self-presentation. Okay. So it's not self, it's not simply feedback from others, but you perform them. Okay. And so there are phrases in here. Front stage, this is not difficult to understand. Okay. Front stage and backstage, right? So here is a front stage. You behave one way. And then when you get out of class, let's say you're totally bored, you're at the backstage. I don't know what you're talking about me, and I don't want to know. Okay. So that will be it. Front stage, backstage. We all know this, right? I used to work in the Chinese restaurants when I was in graduate school. Front stage, I smile, I politely serve them food. But backstage, I got really angry because that person I know never paid tips. What I mean. So those kind of things, and you almost want to spit on their food. But that's pretty much okay. Front stage, backstage. The same thing. You go to car repair shops. The front stage, gleaming, clean, with coffee, and the backstage, you don't know what they're doing to your car, right? It's just not difficult to understand. Okay, front stage, backstage. Because the world is a stage, then you use pretty much all the dramaturgical school terms. Okay, and you make impression management, right? Basically, I'm playing solitaire. I'm a professor coming in. I switch to Word documents when he leaves. We do this all the time, right? And what else do I have? Stable inattention, right? Anybody know what stable inattention? You learn textbook means. Stable inattention, sometimes called studied non-observance. Okay, stable inattention basically, you hold some. So you have a lover, you're holding them, and you hear the stomach growls. You pretend you didn't hear it. That's kind of civil inattention. You actually learned deeply what to pay attention and what to ignore to let society run smoothly. So society has roles and statuses, and with those roles, we learn how to perform them. We know how to, just play according to the script, essentially, right? And given off, sometimes, honestly, sometimes I really don't know. But toward the end of the class, for example, let's say students begin to pack up. Is it really that they know the class is ending, I'm going to another class, or that's given? That's a stated purpose, right? Another purpose would be, another one given off would be, you're doing this, but maybe it's not intentional, but I began to given off to me is class is ending. You're about to leave, right? So one is you intentionally having somebody, one is ending. Let's say you're looking at your watch. I heard in Japan, I heard some people say this, I don't know for sure, but in Japan, when somebody say, gosh, that's a beautiful watch, usually that's a given off, means you need to go now. Okay, so people do this, right? So that's given off, right? So that's pretty much the dramaturgical school. And how important it is, honestly, on the surface, well, first, in contrast to Mead and Looking Glass Self, Cooley, I think this one totally different. It's an active self that has an agency, right? The term in academic called agency, right? You're able to do something. And secondly, I'll just give one. This is actually from an actual research to talk about this, but I think it's interesting. Illustration, actually. Okay. In the gynecological exam, for example, the issue is how do you set the setting so that you neutralize all the other meanings except medical exam. Do you follow me so far? And how do you do that is, for example, you have a doctor in, but the doctor, so get out, you change, doctor come back, you have a nurse go with you as a company. Do you follow me so far? All these things are you set under the screen. All of these things are set up to make sure to change the meaning of things. Everybody follow me so far? Okay. And so to me, that's basically showing how meanings are shaped. This is very symbolic interaction, right? How meanings are shaped by the setting. Remember, I give the example of how Elton John singing with Eminem can change the meaning of the song, right? Actually, I was driving here. I just come up with something, so I was writing right before your class. Okay, I just want to give you this, and you can decide on your own. I'm just thinking out of my mind, okay, on this. So people talk about how to have free speech on campus without getting too much arguments or getting so destructive. And I'm thinking, honestly, we can use Erving Goffman in the sense, what it means is how do I structure, right? How do I create a stage setting to make sure the discussion is not contribute to learning, to contribute to constructive dialogue, rather than just venting and destructive dialogue. Everything from me so far? Honestly, I don't know about you guys. I know myself. Okay, I've been studying for a long time. I know myself. When you get into conversation about these political or moral issues, ultimately everybody wants to be the winner. Everybody, it's like a competition for words. Okay? Everybody wants to show they are right. Okay, this is natural. Okay, it's in other words, the arguments is no longer simply about arguments. The arguments about who you are. Okay? It's an identity issue, right? So the issue is how do I structure the discussion so that I can take the emotional to bracket the emotional element and let people have a civil discourse, right? And I don't know about you guys. I actually struggled with it a little bit when I designed. I mean, this class is not online, but discussions online. I'm also teaching an asynchronous online class. For example, when I designed the online discussion, for example, okay, there's a choice when I design the discussion boxes. There's a choice I can give people to write anonymously. I didn't check the box. Should I check that box? It's a question mark. I debated about it. Okay, because you give an anonymous, then you give a license to what people can say whatever they want to say. I don't care about they say whatever they want to say, but I do want them to write things not abusive. Just so far, not too personal. Because when you focus on ideas, you don't focus on the speaker, right? That's the whole thing. So I'm trying to do right here. So the front stage would be the scripts. I would articulate my expectations. When I teach this class, to be honest with you, I have 3 expectations. One is be honest. You say what you truly feel. You don't have to pretend. Second, be civil. You try to use the arts of communication without just being mature, without trying to be, abusive, right? The third one, I say open-mindedness in terms of people can still listen to each other, right? Even if you disagree, what part agree, what part disagree, right? So, but with that principle, that's a script. I'm trying to tell people what to do. You give this, right? And you teach etiquette, okay? So when people get angry or whatever, you want to, the thing is you ask questions. I may not be successful at the time, but I try to make the question empirical, specific, and make them into genuine question, rather than showing a particular argument. Different so far, and then you're able to do this. The point I'm trying to say is how you structure it to make sure the conversation reach the good effect rather than destructive effect, right? And I say props, I can do this. I mean, I haven't asked people to do this. You can humanize, let people put their pictures in there. So you are less likely to react too strongly when you actually see a person, not just an idea. I'm thinking to myself, maybe I'm wrong. Okay. You know what I mean, right? So backstage would be private feedbacks I give it to you that I don't show in the public, right? So it avoid the face issue, right? Avoid the face issue. You can avoid people being feel insulted, right? By the way, I just want to say this. I think this thing is in the US today, public education, especially social science education, are supposed to be challenging. No matter which political background you're in, It's not supposed to make you feel comfortable. It's just supposed to make with every idea being challenged. If everybody always want to feel good, then what's the point? It's supposed to make us feel uncomfortable, right? Feel like our assumptions, gee, you're saying this, that kind of thing, right? Shock a little bit. I used to have a philosophy professor who teach me that, my whole point is to confuse you. You get confused about it. The whole thing is you thought the clear cut right around this. I just totally flip this. Actually, I have an idea. Just talking with you, I have an idea. I didn't ask you guys do this. How about I make every student to write an essay that's exactly the opposite of what they believe. You force students to write an essay exactly. So basically, you have to make the best arguments from the other side. And to me, it's called cognitive dissonance, right? You can pretty much make sure that people can listen to each other, right? And I read the cost of cancel culture. It's debatable, but I think it's here. Okay, if I put all the sensitive, controversial topics in the backstage, which means nobody talk about it because we want to love each other, we want to be friendly, we want to be respectful, not hurt people's feelings. Is that a good strategy? Is it good to put them back into the backstage? Or is it better bring them out to the open, show the dirty laundries, and then people can debate about it, right? The question is, what do you do about it? So far, okay. Impression management, again, should you allow participants anonymous? I don't know. You guys can think about it, okay? Give enough, so people may do things that they not, you say something, I don't know, you do it intentionally as a given, or you do it unconditionally as given enough. So what can I do is allow people to clarify their points, right? So basically, I'm just giving an example. You can come up probably better than myself. Yeah. But I think it's important to do this. The same thing I read here in couple relations. I talk about this. We'll talk about this in chapter 10. I think when I was brought up in China, we pretty much feel once you're family, you can be just quite. You don't have to pretend anymore. Right? You're supposed to be friends to each other. I mean, just you reveal your true self, right? Unlike because once you're in the family, the door is closed, and the door is the sun. Inside is the backstage, outside is the front stage, right? Once you're inside, you're supposed to be able to be true to yourself. I don't know you guys agree. In any relationship I learned in US, which I tend to agree, relationship and art is you have to do some pretending, right? Minor things, okay? You have to do some pretending. That's how society works. You don't just say, gosh, that's stupid. Or you always do something. The relationship collapses because you don't have the skill, right? Even inside, basically even in intimate relationships, we have to fake, essentially, right? So that's for a good purpose, I think, make the relationship goes better. Well, anyway, any thoughts, comments so far? We're just talking about Erving Goffman's idea. I'm just trying to think how to apply it. Okay. Any thoughts? Hello? Everybody understand it? It's not too difficult. Oh, by the way, I want to write this. Okay. Erving Goffman's idea do have an issue. The issue, I think, is they not realize the issue of power. Okay. So you are all freely communicating on Instagram, right? But who owns Instagram? Who owns X? Who owns Blue Sky? Right? Different so far? Okay. And these are people who use algorithms can constrain what's proper, what's not proper. Right? Everybody heard the news? Trump just got, I think, $20 million payback from YouTube because YouTube took him off in after January 6th, the attack on Congress, and they took his account off. And now Trump sued them, and they reinstated his account and paid him $20 million. Okay, but the key thing is here. I'm using an example to show who controls the platforms. Right. In other words, if we all play according to a script, who wrote the script? You remember so far? That's the question, right? And I think what it does is world is a stage where all players forgot, right here, who's the producer, who's the producer, and who's the producer and who's the designers. Okay. If anybody has some thoughts, comments on this, I'll be happy to. I may not be able to answer them. Okay. Feel free, okay, if you have some thoughts. Okay, so that's Erving Goffman. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about another concept your textbook is almost there. Okay. That's where's the name list? That's called total institution. Okay. Yes. Oh. Okay. So people talk about total. So total institution have to do with another concept called it's in your textbook called re-socialization. Okay. So what's re-socialization is you have to de-learn everything you learned before and relearn something new. It's called re-socialization. Okay. Don't forget the term difference. When I ask you to define socialization, I may put a re-socialization there. You know that's not socialization. Re-socialization means you have to de-learn something and relearn some new things. Okay. So the definition is here. Re-socialization, first unlearn what you learned before, and then relearn new rules and skills and adapt a new self. That's called re-socialization. Okay. Re-socialization, the typical institution we'll talk about is prisons, mental hospitals, boot camps, nursing homes. Everybody follow me so far? Okay. Those are supposed to be places, total institution. It's called total because pretty much your identity is totally controlled. Okay, that's central. Okay. So I put a definition of this. Basically, total institution is the degree to which an organization envelopes has total power on all aspects of an individual's life. Why we say prison is that way. So prison, you literally, when you come in, why do they shave your head? Why do they strip you and have you a new different garbs? Why don't they give you your name but call the prison numbers? Right? The whole point is to strip you of your former identity and give you a new one. Right? The same thing with military boot camps. I want to create a group unity that's all for one, one for all. I no longer think of myself simply column one. I think of a member of this battalion. Right? You want to build that loyalty group, right? Because everybody in this room, I think, understand soldiers don't just fight for patriotism. Soldiers fight for their bodies, right? The issue is how do you build this body group, right? That would be re-socialization, simply put. Okay, you strip the older edition, give the new one, and the characteristic. This is from your textbook. Okay, the characteristic of total institution. First of all, your daily activity happens in one place. There's no public and private separation. Some people, I know some students, when I used to talk about it, some students feel high schools and the college is like a total institution. Basically, I think the feeling is because students feel suffocated sometimes, can feel like constrained what the freedom can do. Okay, I would, if I think about total institution as a variable, varies. I think Marquette campus, for example, because you have on-campus dorms, right? But generally speaking, I think your behavior in here and your behavior go to your dorms and go to home. You have still three different spheres, right? You have your private sphere and public sphere. Everybody follow me so far? Okay. So, but in total institution, you don't have that. Everybody understand in prisons, so the cells have windows, or sometimes don't even have windows, right? If you are observed by a tower in the middle that's supposed to see everything. Everybody know what I mean? It's called panopticon. In chapter 6, you'll talk about this, right? It's like in my eyes, I'll be honest with you, in my mind, it's almost like Sauron's eye, like looking at everything, right? And that's That's total institution. There's no private and public. Okay, you're observed. There's no way you can escape. Okay. Second, a single authority oversees all. Okay. Third is your individual identities replaced with organizational identity. You guys are no longer each individual. To me, you guys just become a student in this class, right? So that'll be total institution, okay? Or in prison, okay? That'll be you're just, prisoner 8592 or something like that. Right? So that would be the total institution. I'm pretty. Now, do you think there's a difference between these two? I put it in an intentionally. These two, prison and mental hospital, nursing home, boot camps. Do you see a difference between them? People tend to put all of these as examples of total institution. I think there's a difference. Anybody have some thoughts on this? Do you think there's a difference between them? I think these ones are more like you volunteer yourself into it. You can exit at least. Here is you can no longer exit. You pretty much get into it. You are stuck there. Right? You don't have much choice. To a certain extent, I don't know if you agree with me. I think cult or something like that as well. But you get in, it's difficult to get out. And probably they control your mind so much you don't even think about getting out anymore. That's in a sense. Okay. But that would be a total institution. But I would say there's a difference between, you voluntarily get into it versus totally forced into it. Anybody ever thought about, I haven't read the book, but I just know the story, okay? Anybody know something called 1989? I mean, 1984, the book, right? Yeah, 1984. The issue is, actually they have this topic in chapter 6. Are we already living in a total institution? 1984. Put it this way, I don't know if you agree with me. I feel Google knows me more than I know myself. Because I Google all the time, but I don't check my patterns. Google, based on what I typed in, knows my spending patterns, what I like to buy, what interests me. They know all of this. In a sense, I'm not trying to be dramatic here. I really think privacy, not only US, but everywhere, privacy is a joke these days. The only thing I don't care, because I'm such a small potato, I don't think the people in power even cares. But still, anybody notice how they catch criminals so fast? Usually, if a really high profile case, I noticed in the US, pretty much within 72 hours, they can capture him. If you haven't monitored them all the time, you catch them so easily. Okay, that's me. That's just some suspicious in my mind. I'm being conspiracy theorist now. But anyway, but you know what I mean, right? The whole basically the point is, are we already living in surveillance society? Of course, just because you live in surveillance society doesn't mean you care. I mean, a lot of Chinese know they're living in surveillance society, but they just give it up pretty much. Okay. But anyway, just basically I'm saying is, are we living in a total institution? Right? That's to certain degrees. Google will be the omnipresent eye. Okay, almost like a god now. Omnipresent, powerful, right? Is that the term? Omnipotent, I think that's. All right, so I'm going to just get to the last one. The last one topic, I just want to bring it up to you. You can think for yourself. I don't want to get in too deep into this, but because nobody knows. Traditionally, if you think about who socializes us, family, you take your book. Okay, your book several pages on agents of socialization, right? Family, schools, peers, workplace, right? They're pretty much those major institutions, okay, in socialize us. Now we have a new thing called digital world, right? Everybody knows that. Right? I'm trying to not exaggerate. Digital world. So everybody, digital means I'm assuming everything translates into numbers, and then you can manipulate, right? Pretty much. So the digital world may have algorithms as instructions, right? and they may have social media platforms, right? And all kinds of things, right? And AI, right? The rise of AI. So I put a few questions in here. Now, let me put this. Our topic in this chapter is on socialization, selfhood. How do I construct who I am based on family, friends, peer influences, schools influences, right? And I'm looking at status and roles, right? And I'm looking at parenting style differences, right? And so then the question is, how does the rise of the digital world affect each one of this? Everything from this so far, so your dependent variable are selfhood, statuses, parenting style differences, right? That's the topic we're discussing. And traditionally, we think they're influenced by family, friends, peers, schools. Now we add a social digital platform. How would they influence the traditional things we're concerned with? Do they influence them just a different form? Nobody should care, or they are some fundamental differences? That's the question, right? That's an open question. I think the newer generation of sociologists may get into. I don't think there's not enough publication on this yet. Okay. So I'm just reading some questions. Social media metrics are not just mirrors like looking glass self, but actually distorted, amplified, monetized. So other words, the people who reflect on you are the people who can get money out of this. So far, so by praising you, I get paid, right? So it's a new kind of feedback. And I mentioned this before: anonymous friends, intimate strangers, right? And online life, you have multiple roles. You can be a gamer, influencer, anonymous poster, okay, which are defined, detached from your offline roles. So who are you now? Is there, which one is genuine you? Because you have so many different, you add, basically I'm saying this, at least you have new roles, okay? You have a content creator. So frankly, I don't even need social status. Older generation like me, many of them still think social influencer is not a real job. But I think honestly, chances are we are pretty much wrong. It's become a new job. I don't know if you understand me, right? It's getting so widespread. Right? That's a new roles. Right? Algorithm exposed to kids contribute gender norms. Okay, began to use people who propose to be more liberal and more independent. And there are also, I don't know, most people notice nowadays, I think it's something called a trade wife or something, maybe see on the internet, right? So they're proposing traditional wives, okay, and contradictory gender norms. And of course, this one that concerns me a lot. Okay, I think I mentioned this before. When I kill people, I no longer have to face put a knife into the person's heart. I mean, it's graphic. Most people are able to do it. But if I just do it as a computer, thousands of miles away, just like playing computer game, I can barely see the blood. I cannot hear the scream. I cannot smell the blood. And I can only see the person explosion, and I don't even see the corpse. Would I feel much more easier for me to play this? And besides, I don't even have to risk my physical safety. I'm just thousands places away. Everybody from this so far, how does that impact the likelihood of war to happen? Everybody from this so far, it's really, I don't know. Okay, anybody? There's a movie, very good movie, I think. It's called Ender's Game. Anybody have seen that? It's beautiful. At the end, it just really tears your heart out. I didn't expect. He thought he was playing a game, but I'm not going to give you spoilers. But anyway, it's interesting. Okay, what about children babysat by Alexa? So remember the video you saw earlier. Babies seem to have some initial innate empathy capacity, right? They understand that somehow when you hurt, I feel hurt too. Right? That's basically if anybody learned the Piaget in the psychology, right? One of the things is, when you teach children, I think it's the egocentric stage where you teach children, for example, don't touch the plant. Why not touch plant? Because the plant will get hurt, right? That kind of thing. Because you cannot say the plant get anything. You have to put because the child can only see it from their own eyes. If you touch me, I feel hurt, and that plant will get hurt. From so far, you have to always see from your own eyes. Now you have a baby who playing with Alexa just may not can scream and shout, just inanimate, respond. So how would I learn empathy? Do you find this so far? These are genuine issues, okay? And I don't know the answer to that. It's just tough, okay? But on the other hand, just let me, if you have something to say, just let me know, okay? But on the other hand, I think something people don't talk a lot about. People always complain that the technology are making us less personal, less emotional, connecting to each other. I think it could be the other way around. As people increasingly become more machine-like, and increasingly we are beginning to argue with each other by using abusive languages. Anybody use ChatGPT or AI? Do you notice how polite they communicate? So basically, the past civilization has been algorithmized. I don't know what's the English word, okay, to put input into ChatGPT. Could be ChatGPT actually teach us how to be civil when we already lost civility. Do you know what I mean? Basically, it teach you how to write, how to interact with people. So I don't know, but the world is changing so fast. Previously, you remember the textbook talk about Turing test, where you test to what extent the computer are more like can imitate human beings. Now, things the other way around, right? I mean, if anybody go to any site, there's a small thing. Is this human? You click. So far, is this human? Then it's check your human. In other words, the machine was testing whether I'm human or not. Right? It's just totally the other way around, right? So we're in a very new stage. I don't think anybody knows what's going on. Okay, be honest with you. I don't think anybody knows what's going on. But that's a new way of thinking how socialization will work in the future. Finally, I'm going to say that this is not the most important concept, but I'm just going to, it's not supposed to be in this chapter, okay? But anyway, your textbook put in this chapter. Did I give you the name list already? Yeah, okay. Now, the key thing is this. A textbook talk about social construction of reality. Basically, the idea is it's this symbolic interaction perspective. Remember, I have a test question on this in the midterm exam, okay? Basically, situations defined as real is real in its consequence. Remember that? Okay, so it all depends on how people interpret things. And because how people interpret things determine how they act. It's not reality determine how you act, but your interpretation of reality determine how you act. Remember that, right? So the understanding reality is more like I think, therefore I am. Okay. The understanding of reality is more like what is reality? From this perspective, reality is consensus. If everybody think it exists, then it exists. If everybody don't think it exists, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist means it has no consequences because you don't think it's meaningful, right? That's the social construction reality. Your textbook gave you some examples. I just want to share with you a little bit, okay? So you may not need to read the textbook, okay? Adulthood, we think it is a social reality, but this is easy to understand. Adulthood is difficult to define, right? It's pretty much. I think I have a picture here. Let me see if I have it here. Yeah, and this is probably I need to update it. Probably it's a little bit old. I don't know which year it is. Okay, but so for juvenile delinquency, who's juvenile? If you commit a crime, which court do you go to? Adult court or juvenile court? So if you are in Wisconsin, you commit a crime at 17, you will go to adult court, right? But if you go to Illinois, you'll be sent into juvenile court. Do we follow so far? Okay, it depends, right? The same thing with let's see. The same thing with you can vote 18, join the military at 18, drink but 21, drive 16. The issue is what is adulthood, right? And that's one thing. Secondly, just a typical example, okay? People give the concept of adolescence, okay? So I think I used the Ingram to show this. You look at it, if you type in the word adolescence and teenager, you see the term didn't much exist before 1920s. And then it began to show, oh, actually, about the adolescence is about, yeah, about 1880. After this, you see the term adolescence rise up. In other words, we can literally say adolescence is a new social invention. There were no adolescents in the older days. By that, we don't mean there are people who are 10 to 15 years of age. We're simply saying people do not think. During those days, they're a particular life stage that have special needs during those days. Have you found it so far? Okay, so that's basically the social construction perspective. And it is important because I just want to show you, the same time when the term adolescence emerged, it's the same time when U.S. first juvenile court, actually I think the world's first juvenile court was established in Chicago. Okay, that's where people began to think, gee, you shouldn't treat children the same way as others, pretty much, right? So that's the beginning of this. It's interesting, okay, to think about. Then the next question is why this time? Why not other times? Okay, so you think about this. Maybe the juvenile court rights, I know, have to do with the child savers movement. There's a big child savers movement against child labor. It's the same time, okay? And also they were worried, a lot of young immigrants, working class, especially Italians, okay, slums areas, they worried these kids, their child saver movement, they want to save them, okay? They want to make sure the children are taken care of or controlled at least. So they want to use juvenile courts to be able to handle this situation, essentially. Okay. But anyway, so that's about social construction. I always feel social construction concept is interesting in the sense, let's say I'm walking toward a cliff. You say reality as the cliff exists. Well, it doesn't exist, but I'm going to fall to the ground. So my point here is you're telling me reality is always subjective. I just don't quite. Okay. But they do have a point. The issue that let me try to make sure that you understand this. Okay, well, I'm going to mention this again in chapter 6. To say reality is subjective, socially constructed, people often misunderstand it, thinking it is talking about things are subjective. When actually, I think the social construction perspective is teaching us want to focus on how the reality is constructed. Okay, let me try to give you something you understand. Okay, for example, domestic violence. Domestic violence is a social construction. Do I mean by that? Why do I say that? Because the term domestic violence did not exist until later on. Because previously people think wives are the property of the husband. So far, and increasingly we are paying more and more attention to it. Then it becomes a reality, right? Because it's a concept. It's just a same behavior. We give a different concept. You mean from just like ADD used to have always existed, but we find a new label. And the more the industry more label it, the more become an issue, right? From so far. Now, don't misunderstand. Does this mean we shouldn't pay attention to domestic violence? Since it's social construction? Not at all. I think they will teach us should pay attention to how the concept domestic violence slowly evolve. What are the factors affecting the change of the concept? Okay, feminist movement, we understand how that works, right? We understand, we will talk about chapter 10, where there's a political model of domestic violence. There's a other model for domestic violence. The issue is you want to find out, they want you to focus attention, not on how bad domestic violence is. They want to pay attention to how the term was, what are the political forces that create the term. Do you find this so far? People tend to understand it. They thought this is blaming the victim. I don't think it is. Okay, this is not saying domestic violence doesn't matter. They want to pay attention to the political forces that create the concept. Right. So, and okay. Finally, I'm just going to wrap up in this way. I hope it's not too controversial, but still, I think it's a good way to think about it. Right. This is Mexico and U.S. border. Okay, there's a fence in between. Right. I mentioned this in other class before. Nation is a imagined community. We'll talk about this in chapter 3, okay? Collective memories. Nation is imagined community. We imagine we're one group, right? And so in I would say 1890s, when the way we think about what America is we don't get offended here. There used to be a phrase in the 1890s. Okay, a political scientist from England came to U.S. Okay, make the argument. Okay, please don't. I'm just quoting it. Don't take offended. Okay, the way they put it is this: America would be great if you can kill if every Irishman would kill a Negro and be hanged by it. Anybody heard it before? That's the way they put it. Now, what does it mean? Basically, they want to get rid of both both African Americans and Irish. You feel so far? Okay. But the point in the other plan is, what's a nation supposed to be? A nation supposed to be composed of people of one race. Okay. So peoplehood is one race. Only after, I would say, 1930s, America began to think about something called melting pot, where a nation is supposed to have by the same principle, but can have different racial groups. So far, the idea began to change. Okay, but the point I'm saying here is what's American, the idea has been transforming, right? And that's so. I don't know most people know this, but I think U.S. economy, a Mexican economy, to a large extent, has been integrated in terms of farmers coming to America to work, and you build employee relationships for a long time. You marry each other, and tracking manufacturing, pretty much the country, economically speaking, already become integrated. But politically, we put a division. I'm not making a political statement, okay, but just describing this here. Politically, we make a division between it, right? So in other words, nation is an imagined community. And that's the reason why today we have so much debate about it, because we want to see what's America, right? Basically, you want to say construct a nationhood, right? Construct a nationhood, and we have so much debate. Earlier times, you want to take all the Confederate tombs, and now we want to even make what it mean a deserving medals of honor, right? So the issue is people are debating about what's the community, because we're reimagining the community, right? Social construction of reality. That's pretty much what we're talking about. Okay. I know the heavy stuff. Okay, but is it important to us? I think it does. Okay. I don't have evidence to show this, but I follow George Herbert Mead's idea. When society itself is polarized, is chaotic, anomaly, it's bound to have some influence on the individual's psychology. So people tend to think mental health issue as only psychological individual issues. I think there might be some social forces behind it. I just don't know for sure. Okay, I'll give it to you. Anybody have some thoughts, comments on this so far? We're done with this chapter.